Bam, LionHeart. I love you so much. I've learned so much from you about mobility and humanity. And I want to ask you this question. How is it that our household furniture is fighting us when we want to return to more primal movement?
Well, probably it's a great question, and it's one that we really want to examine because we spend a lot of time at home using our furniture.
Hmm.
That's our dining room chairs, that's our couches, many different places where we're going to be sitting for a prolonged period of time. The classic sitting position in the couch and in the dining room chair puts us at a 90-degree angles. So from our torso to our hip, and then hip to knee, and then knee to foot. And these 90-degree angles are really unnatural for us to maintain and hold for prolonged periods of time. And because they're unnatural positions for us, they cause a lot of tension. We're going to feel that tension in the front of our hips.
Yeah.
We're going to feel that tension in our stomach, in our psoas, because that's what's going to be holding us up. And we're going to feel that a little bit in our low backs. And eventually, if we spend a lot of time in these chairs, in our necks and the backs of our shoulders.
But wait, I want to ask you a question. So you said this is an unnatural position for us to be seated in this kind of right angle way. How did people traditionally sit?
Yeah, for most of humanity, except before now that we have the 90-degree angle chair, the classic desk chair, we were sitting on the ground. And so we were either on the ground, like so our tissue, our legs were on the floor,
Yeah.
or we were on like very small stumps or very small chairs that put our hips beneath our knees and not in this 90-degree angle.
Who came up with this chair design? I'm curious. Do you know?
I'm not sure. My general feeling and theory was that it kind of was the same as housing. Like
Yeah.
before, we didn't all have these big houses and these big chairs. It was reserved for like the royalty or for like the kings and the queens. And so if you were on sitting on a big chair, it was like you were pretty big time. And so we started to see that just like when indigenous see people wearing clothes, they're like, oh, this is a status symbol that I want to have because I want to be of a higher status. And so the chair or the high chair became associated with royalty or a high status symbol. And then eventually, clothing, big houses, big chairs became the norm.
It's so funny because what's crossing my mind right now is how, for example, it used to be a sign of wealth if you had a very pale skin because it meant you spent very little time outdoors and all your servants were doing that. But what we didn't realize when we started thinking that this was wonderful is actually how good the sun is for us, right? So it's like we thought this was a wonderful thing for us to have these chairs because it made us seem like we were upper class, but it was hurting us.
Yep. And so there's so many examples of that in our own homes, in the most of our homes that are like that. Like for instance, if we look at all of the furniture or all of the places that we have to rest, most of them are going to be in that 90-degree seated position, on a couch, in a dining room chair, on a high stool, something like that. It's
Mhm.
pretty foreign for Westerners to have a floor resting position. But in the Middle East or in Japan, this is really common. In those places, you also see a really large reduction in back pain and hip replacement surgeries. So there's a
Really?
little bit of a correlation that you can look at and you can make, but I'd encourage everyone just to try it for themselves. What happens if I give myself more space in my home to go up and down from the floor?
So what would that look like? Let's say you come into my house and you are like, okay, ixnay on that, ixnay on that. What do I do instead?
Instead, we're going to look for rugs and cushions. These are going to be the best. And so if you look at just the general layout of a room, let's say a living room, there's
Mhm.
going to be like a large square living area. And then often what happens is a couch or a dining room set becomes the center point and focus. And so the center point where all the energy goes around and gathers around is going to be in a seated position. So instead of putting a couch or a chair or a seated center focus, you move those to the periphery, to the outside. You give them still as an option. And in the center, you put really comfortable rugs, really comfortable meditation pillows. It's an inviting place where people feel naturally drawn to the floor. And then if they want seated positions, they can go to the outside or periphery of those rooms.
Interesting. You know, what's crossing my mind right now is that children will probably love this, but adults maybe not so much because they're unaccustomed to these positions that actually are more natural and better for us.
hmm And it's because sitting on the floor requires a lot of mobility. So if you've been sitting in chairs for most of your life, when you start to come back to the floor, you're going to realize, man, there's something that I lost. But this is great because in your resting positions at home, you can be unlocking the mobility of your ankles, knees, hips, and low back, all while watching a TV show, enjoying a meal with your family, or hanging out with your friends.
Okay, so let's say I'm ready to try this, and actually I am, so that's good. Um, does it matter if I decide I'm going to sit cross-legged or if I'm going to be reclining? Does it matter what position I take when I'm on the floor?
There are certain positions that are better than others, but the most important thing to know is that it's going to be completely different than the chair. The position that you adopt right now on the floor, after about 2 to 3 minutes, is going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and your body is going to ask you to change. It's going to
Uh-huh.
say, hey, that's a little bit too much pressure on my ankles, a little bit too much pressure on my hips. So, can you move position? So, you'll find yourself moving a lot, whereas in the couch or the chair, you're accustomed to sitting for 60 minutes, 90 minutes without having to change position. But on the floor, you're going to be doing a lot of that. And then you will find naturally the healthiest and the strongest positions.
Interesting. And it's not bad if our body says, hey, shift. You can, instead of thinking like, oh, I guess that means I need to get in a chair again, maybe we should be thinking, oh, the body's inviting me to try a different position. And that frequent adjustment is okay, right?
Yeah, the body loves to have pressure. So pressure coming in, pressure coming out. And so think about all of our tissues like sponges. When we go onto the floor, if it's a little bit harder, it's going to squeeze all of that liquids, bloods, or anything like that we have in our tissue. And then when it's ready to be released, it's going to ask you to move. And as soon as you take pressure off, boom, new blood flow can come into the area. So think about lymphatic drainage. You can think about even all the time that people do stretching or on a foam roller. The
Yeah.
ground is the best foam roller. So we're constantly getting this nice myofascial kind of tissue work just by resting and moving on the floor.
Okay, so in your day to day, because I know you do spend a little bit of time on your computer, right? What does that look like for you, Bam? Like, what is your body? What positions? Right now, I'm standing. I don't know if you're standing, but I avoid sitting when possible. But let's say you had to do 3 hours with the computer. How would you position yourself?
Yeah, so I'm always on the floor, and then I'll give myself, and like right now I'm on the floor, boom,
Ah,
crisscross.
okay.
And so I like a half lotus is my personal favorite. And then I'll give myself a yoga block or a cushion or even a very tiny chair. And so while I'm sitting on the floor, I'm changing positions. I'm changing positions. And so I do spend a lot of time on the computer and I'm just allowing myself to move while on the computer.
And that's what kids do. If you go to a playground, I don't even know why they put the benches there for the teachers, I guess, because the kids are crawling under the benches and then they're climbing the tree. And then if they're playing in the sand, they're moving in all these ways. And somewhere along the way, we've lost it, right?
Yeah, we had to be taught how to sit still. Like think about the amount of repetitions and cues that teachers and parents sit still. Like, hey, sit back in your chair, sit back in your chair, until we understand how to command our body to sit still for a prolonged period of time. Now, that's a skill set that can really help us when we need it to. But what I've seen in children and then now in young adults is that still sitting has become their subconscious default. And so returning to movement is a little bit more challenging, a little bit difficult and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the normal state for humans is to always be in movement and not sitting still.
I'm thinking about transport right now. So, how do you manage this when you're driving or when you're in an airplane? Because there are the chairs again, right?
Yeah, that's a really great question because also there are people who aren't ready to make a change of their chair situation. Like, let's say if they work in an office, and so as much as you can, you're trying to make a little break. So let's say you're working for an hour, you set a 5 or 10 minute movement snack timer,
Yeah.
and every hour you do 5 minutes or 10 minutes of stretching, walking around, some squats, some hinges, some basic movement to get some blood flow happening and some muscular activation. In a
Mm.
plane, that looks like on the hour, you get up and you walk the aisles up and down, or my favorite is you go to the emergency row and you just do a few stretches.
Yeah.
In a car, when you pull over to fill up with gas, or there's a nice scene, you just take a second, and then throughout a workday, the same thing, just putting a little timer on and just remembering to just give yourself just a little bit of movement in between these long work sessions.
Okay, I think I'm going to out you a little bit too, but I believe I've seen a video of you online, or if it wasn't you, it was someone else who's big on mobility, bringing your knees to your chest and then putting the seatbelt around your legs like that. Have you ever done that on an airplane, or is that just my imagination?
Yeah, I sit like a squat on an airplane. So I do
Yeah.
a bunch of things that not everyone can do. I'll sit like a squat. I'll sit in a lotus position. I have even been known to do a forward fold stretch in an airplane chair. It's just how much do you want to go to how good do you want to feel after your airplane flight? That's
I
the question.
know. This is the thing. I have to say, you have to withstand some looks because whenever I walk in the aisle and I don't look like I'm just going to the bathroom, but I start walking up and down, I get a lot of stares. And maybe it's because I'm disrupting people's screen time. I don't know, but I'm just like, you have to withstand a little bit of that and ask yourself, how much do I want to? I also actually in the bathroom will do squats and I'll do some, arm
Mhm.
pumps. I'll do things because I'm like, okay, at least no one's staring at me here. But I guess I have to get over the side eye, right?
Yeah, you do have to get over the side eye. And two things that I would recommend. The first one is to remember that when you're doing something that's good for your body, good for your soul, good for just taking care of yourself, it's not always the most socially acceptable thing. And so when people do look at you with the side eye, the best thing you can do is just have a little smirk of joy on your face, letting them know that it's okay. And
Yeah.
hey, if you ever wanted to do this, you can do it too. I give you permission. And so by taking care of ourselves, we give the rest of everyone else the permission to also join in on that. So if you are a leader, that's just something you can think of when you're feeling a little bit of judgment. The
Hmm.
second thing is you can be a little sneaky. And so I will find myself getting up from my chair, going to the very back, and I'm chit-chatting with the flight attendants as they're sitting in their chair, and I'm having nice conversations. And while we're having nice conversations, I'm doing little squats and I'm doing little movements, little stretches just on the side.
I like that. I like that. Smile and be sneaky. And of course, as Holistic Hilda, I love the alliteration. Bam, thank you for your insights today. I can't wait to see you in person at Solta. And I know you're going to be at Omega in September. So we'll try to put links to all those things so people can find you.
Thank you so much for having me.